thank you so much, Beverley, for a wonderful and engaging talk, and what a wonderful way to start the day. I loved some of the early parallels that you draw on between your botanic garden and our own. I also loved the visual feast that you shared with us. You showed us your wild plant bed, the bee beds, and Sam's tulip collection in particular really brought your botanic garden to life for us on the screen, I think. And I know the elephant in the veritable plant room generated some excitement among our listeners as well in our audience. We do have some questions I hope we can ask you, Beverley, but I have a couple myself, actually, if I may. So one, and forgive me, this is not my field, so maybe an ignorant question, but you showed early on a linaria or something like that, a sort of very zygomorphic, sort of bilaterally symmetrical flower, and talked about briefly about that. And then the examples when you talked about iridescence, from what I could see, were all radially symmetrical flowers, like sort of daisy inflorescences, that kind of thing. And then when you mapped them onto the flowering plant phylogeny, again, I could only see the actinomorphic examples. That's not a coincidence, is it? Is that linked to generalist pollinator strategies? What's the story there?
I think so. So there are some exceptions. We have found iridescent legumes, so there are some in the Fabaceae with zygomorphic flowers. But I think if I had to draw a common thread between the flowers that we find that produce this structural colour iridescent effect, it's that they tend to be structurally simple, tend to be round, tend to be short-lived. So a generalist pollination system, but also with a fairly short window in which to attract attention. And so for me, it's a kind of adding sparkle, because you haven't got very long to find that pollinator.
I see. And I had a selfish question, if I may, which is that I couldn't help but notice that your SEM imagery looked very much like, I hope people don't sigh when they hear me say this, but like the peristome structure of an Nepenthes pitcher plant. And I couldn't help but wonder what your thoughts were about whether there's a possibility that there might also be a visual cue to insects rather than just an olfactory one, and rather than it just being there for them to slide in, because it didn't look coincidental to me.
Interesting. I don't know what the scale is, Chris, and we should have a look, but it's certainly possible. Our structures have tactile effects, so we've done some work with the group at the Freiburg Botanic Garden, looking at how our iridescent structures affect grip of beetles on the surface, and they do make them more slippery. So there's definitely overlap between how.
Fascinating. It's a parallel I've not read before, but it seemed quite striking. So I'll move on to the questions from our audience. I'm just going to do these in some of the order in which they've arisen. So Jonathan Mitchley, who gave an excellent talk yesterday, I'm unsurprisingly perhaps liked your elephant slide and your commentary on how this is an example about how we can open students' eyes to the fascination, novelty, value, excitement, and importance of learning about plants. So I think this is more a comment than a question, the kind of example that changes students' perspectives of biology and life forever. So thanks so much for that, Jonathan. And I personally also liked how you connected plants with the very principles of life, Beverley, which I thought also chimed very nicely with some of the content that was discussed yesterday. I'll move on. There's a specific question, I don't know if you know, from Max about iridescence in Selaginella. I believe it's sometimes called a peacock fern, which of course it's not a fern. Do we know the function of that? I don't.
So this is I've done a little bit of work on that, more by my colleague Heather Whitney in Bristol. So we know it's a completely different structural mechanism. In Selaginella, it's a surface stacking of layers of cell wall and cuticle, a little bit like in the blue morpho butterfly, which is also a stacking of chitin. Function, speculation, possibly actually camouflage, because it's strongest in the young leaves, so make them look not like green, nutritious, yummy tissue, so that they're protected from herbivores. Also possibly in reflecting blue light away to reduce UV damage, although the evidence doesn't fit with that when we've tried to look at it.
I see. Thank you, Beverley. I'm conscious of the time, but there's such interesting questions, so I'll maybe ask a couple more brief ones. So I'm not sure if we know the answer to this, but is there a cost to iridescence? Someone asks.
Probably not, because you're not doing anything different than what you'd be doing anyway. You'd have a cuticle on your petal epidermal cells. The cells would have to grow. we haven't done any analysis of it, and we need to know more about the chemistry of the cuticle and the cell wall and how specifically different they have to be to achieve it before we could do that. But I suspect not. I suspect it's just a case of growing within a particular set of parameters.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Beverley. We do have more questions because people found this talk so fascinating, and sadly we don't have quite the time to do them justice. But thank you for the questions, and thank you so much, Beverley, for your wonderful talk and the engaging discussion afterwards. It's been fantastic. So thank you ever so much.